right now. As you sit and take this in, there are an estimated 200 billion trillion stars lighting up the observable universe. Each one is a glowing beacon in the dark, and many of them are orbited by planets, some of which may very well cradle life. When faced with such staggering numbers, it feels almost inevitable that the cosmos should be overflowing with civilizations. You'd expect vast alien cities spread across distant planets, teeming with activity. Our telescopes should be catching wave after wave of radio transmissions, signals from a multitude of intelligent species. The night sky itself should be aglow not just with the cold light of stars, but with the synthetic brilliance of spacefaring societies. So why is it so quiet? Where is everyone? This evening, we're going to delve into one of the most deeply disturbing ideas science has ever had to grapple with. It's a hypothesis that suggests we may be living through the last act of humanity's story without even knowing it. But before we immerse ourselves in this cosmic puzzle, I'd really like to know where in the world you're watching from. And I'd be curious to hear what questions about our place in the universe keep you up at night. If this kind of exploration into the deeper questions of existence resonates with you, then it would mean a lot if you liked the video and considered subscribing. That way, you'll be part of this growing group of people who, like you and me, are compelled to seek answers beyond the horizon of what we know. So get ready, the journey begins right here. This is the tale of what scientists call the Great Filter. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand why so many brilliant minds believe we might be locked in a race we didn't even realize had started, against a silent, hidden countdown that's been running since the first moment our ancestors looked up and saw the stars. Imagine the summer of 1950 in the quiet desert of New Mexico, where the future of science was being shaped inside Los Alamos National Laboratory. 4 extraordinary minds, giants in the world of physics, were making their way to the cafeteria for lunch. The air was light with humor as they chatted about the recent surge of flying saucer sightings sweeping across American headlines. Playful speculation filled the space between them. Aliens, faster-than-light travel, visits from other worlds. It was the sort of conversation that brilliant people sometimes indulge in, not because they believe it, but because even the impossible can be fun to ponder. But then, as they sat down, one of them grew quiet. Enrico Fermi. While the others continued their joking, he slipped into thought. His mind began calculating. He thought of the galaxy, our galaxy, with its 200 billion stars. He thought of the billions of years since those stars were born. He imagined the untold chances for life to take hold, to evolve, and to stretch itself across the vast fabric of space. And in that moment, Fermi broke his silence with 3 words that still echo across decades of scientific inquiry. Where are they? That one question, simple and short, opened the door to one of the most profound and unsettling mysteries we've ever faced. When we look out into the cosmos, we see age. We see scale. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. The odds should favor life, not just simple life, but intelligent, technological civilizations. We should see signs of them everywhere. They should be sending signals across the void. Our probes should be tripping over their debris. And the fact that we're here, thinking about it, proves that intelligence can emerge. So why is it so quiet? This became known as the Fermi paradox. And for over 70 years, it's challenged scientists to come up with an explanation. Every answer feels like peeling back another layer of something deeper, something darker. And then, In 1996, a different kind of thinker joined the conversation. Not a physicist this time, but an economist, Robin Hanson, working at the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford. Hanson proposed an idea that sent ripples through the scientific community, not because it was complex, but because it was disturbingly simple. He called it the Great Filter. His proposal was this: somewhere between lifeless matter and a civilization that can colonize the galaxy, there's a stage so difficult to pass that almost no one makes it. An evolutionary bottleneck, a barrier. And this filter, whatever it is so effective that the universe ends up silent, not because life doesn't try, but because it doesn't succeed. Now, that filter could be behind us, meaning we've already cleared the most dangerous stage. That would make us incredibly rare, perhaps unique among all the worlds. Or it could be in front of us, waiting, a step we haven't yet faced that will stop us, just as it may have stopped every other intelligent civilization that ever tried to go beyond their home world. That's what makes the question urgent. Because if the Great Filter is behind us, then we're among the luckiest species to ever exist. The improbable success story. But if it's still ahead, then every advance we make could be taking us closer to something we can't survive. That's the heart of it. A silent warning hidden in the void. To try to find out where this filter might be, Hanson laid out 9 major milestones, key steps a species has to pass to become what he called an explosively persistent civilization. In other words, a civilization capable of spreading throughout the galaxy and surviving long enough to be noticed. The first of these steps is the formation of stars. But not just any stars, the right kind. You need a stellar environment rich in heavier elements, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. These are the things forged in earlier generations of stars. And they're the ingredients for life's chemistry. Then you need a stable star, one that doesn't flare violently, that shines steadily for billions of years. Because life needs time, time to begin, time to evolve. And even with a good star, you still need the right kind of planet. One that sits in the narrow zone where water can stay liquid on the surface. Too close and water vaporizes, too far and it freezes. And that's just the beginning. The planet has to be massive enough to hang on to an atmosphere. It probably needs a strong magnetic field to shield it from harmful cosmic radiation. And it may well need a moon, one big enough to stabilize the planet's spin and create tidal forces that might have helped stir life's early chemistry. When you add it all up, it might sound like a reasonable checklist until you start calculating the odds. Of the thousands of exoplanets we've found beyond our solar system, only a minuscule percentage tick all the right boxes. Most of them orbit too near or too far from their stars, putting them outside the narrow band where temperatures are just right for liquid water. Many of these planets circle red dwarfs, which might seem ideal due to their long lifespans, but they regularly unleash fierce flares, bombarding nearby worlds with intense radiation. Others simply don't offer the kind of environmental stability you'd need to sustain billions of years of continuous biological evolution. But suppose, just for a moment, that all the conditions align. Imagine we've hit the cosmic jackpot. The ideal star, the ideal planet, everything necessary gathered together in a warm, life-friendly ocean, shielded by a nurturing atmosphere. What happens next takes us to step 2, the appearance of molecules that can reproduce. This is where we find ourselves staring into one of the deepest mysteries in all of science. Somehow, on the early Earth, lifeless chemistry had to arrange itself into something that could replicate molecules that could copy themselves. This leap, known as abiogenesis, marks one of the most astonishing shifts in the entire history of the cosmos, the transformation of dead matter into living systems. Scientists have spent decades attempting to replicate this step in the lab. The well-known Miller-Urey experiment in the 1950s managed to create organic compounds, amino acids, under conditions that mimicked those of primitive Earth. But while that was an exciting breakthrough, forming a few simple building blocks in a flask is a long way from generating the kind of complex, self-replicating molecular machinery that life demands. To reach this milestone, the recipe has to be just right. You need the correct combination of molecules in precise ratios, subjected to suitable energy sources in just the right environment, and for exactly the right length of time. Provide too much energy, and the molecules are torn apart. Too little, and the reactions simply stall. The conditions for this to succeed may be incredibly narrow, a sliver of opportunity that could close almost as soon as it opens. And then there's the paradox at the center of life. DNA carries genetic instructions but can't copy itself without proteins. Proteins can catalyze those reactions but can't pass on information without DNA. So how do you get this beautifully interlocked system going from nothing? Some researchers propose an earlier molecular world dominated by RNA, which can both carry information and catalyze reactions. But even this idea faces enormous obstacles. Getting RNA molecules to self-replicate from scratch in a chaotic prebiotic environment is proving to be extremely difficult. When scientists attempt to quantify the odds of abiogenesis, the numbers they arrive at are sobering. Some estimates suggest that the likelihood of life forming spontaneously from non-living chemistry could be as low as 1 in a trillion. With odds like that, it's entirely plausible that this incredible transformation might have only occurred once in our galaxy. If that's true, then this might be our first great filter, the earliest and perhaps most formidable barrier in the journey from chemistry to civilization. But let's allow ourselves a little hope. Suppose life did take hold. Let's imagine that those first fragile, self-replicating molecules gained a foothold in their ancient aquatic environment. They've passed the second test. That brings us to the third step, the emergence of simple, single-celled organisms. At first glance, this might seem like a modest upgrade, but in reality, it's a monumental leap in structural and functional complexity. For these early molecular machines to evolve into proper cells, they had to build membranes to define boundaries, barriers that keep internal chemistry separate from the chaos outside, yet still let essential nutrients pass through. They needed mechanisms to harvest energy and systems to eliminate waste before it became toxic. And even then, progress was slow. On Earth, life remained at this microbial stage for nearly 2 billion years. These early prokaryotic cells, though simple by our standards, were remarkably successful. They colonized virtually every niche, reshaped the oceans and atmosphere, and laid the foundations for everything that followed. But they didn't evolve into anything more complex, not for a very long time. That brings us to step 4, and what could well be the most pivotal hurdle of all, the rise of complex eukaryotic cells. This step, as far as we know, happened only once in the entire history of Earth, and the circumstances that led to it were so improbable that many scientists consider the event to be almost miraculous. Roughly 2 billion years ago, one microbial cell tried to engulf another. Normally, this would have ended in digestion. But in this extraordinary case, the swallowed cell wasn't broken down. It survived inside its host, and over time they formed a partnership. The inner cell provided energy, and the outer one offered protection and resources. Through millions of years of coevolution, this internal guest became the mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the cell, and the host evolved into the first eukaryotic organism. This process, called endosymbiosis, gave rise to cells with internal compartments, including the nuclei and organelles that define all complex life today. Without this single unlikely event, life on Earth would still be microbial. There would be no trees, no insects, no birds, no mammals, no intelligent species pondering the cosmos, no telescopes scanning the skies, no questions about our place among the stars, just bacteria and archaea endlessly dividing, forever stuck in simplicity. And when we think about how rare this transition seems to be, it gives us pause. The path to complexity isn't a steady incline, it's a series of leaps, each one rarer and more demanding than the last. Despite billions of years of evolution and untold trillions of prokaryotic cells, it seems that endosymbiosis may have succeeded only a single time. The precise circumstances required the right organisms meeting at precisely the right moment, the ideal environmental pressures, the necessary genetic compatibility might be so extraordinarily unlikely that most planets hosting simple life never move past the bacterial stage. And that idea carries enormous weight because if endosymbiosis truly marks a kind of great filter, then the cosmos might be dotted with countless worlds filled with nothing more than microbial ecosystems, thriving and adapting over immense stretches of time, yet never taking that transformative step toward the complexity that could eventually give rise to intelligence. But in the story we're following, our imagined civilization somehow pushed through these improbable barriers. They managed the origin of life itself, endured the transition toward organized cells, and achieved the intricate internal structures needed for more advanced evolution. And that leads them straight to step 5, the emergence of sexual reproduction. At first glance, sex might feel like an obvious next development, but biologically speaking, sexual reproduction is surprisingly puzzling. From the perspective of a single organism, it's incredibly inefficient. Why pass on only half of your genetic material when you could simply clone yourself and transmit everything you are to the next generation? Many organisms reproduce asexually and manage perfectly well. Thank you. The key lies in what genetic diversity provides. Sexual reproduction mixes genetic material in ways that allow species to adapt to shifting environments and fend off diseases more effectively. Yet, this benefit comes with a tremendous cost: energy, time, vulnerability, and the need to evolve complex behaviors for locating and attracting mates, along with mechanisms for merging genetic material from two different individuals. On Earth, sex emerged independently multiple times, which suggests that the advantages outweigh the burdens. But that doesn't make the transition automatic. Huge numbers of species remain asexual for millions of years, and some have even abandoned sex after evolving it. For a civilization developing along this path, the introduction of sexual reproduction forms another potential barrier where biological progress could pause indefinitely. If our hypothetical species manages to move beyond this challenge, then they arrive at step 6, the rise of multicellular organisms. This stage requires something extraordinary. Individual cells, which have competed and survived on their own for billions of years, must suddenly surrender a level of autonomy so they can cooperate, specialize, and coordinate. The obstacles they face are enormous. Cells must evolve advanced communication systems to synchronize their actions. They need controlled processes for programmed cell death to remove cells that are damaged or no longer needed. Above all, they must find solutions to the problem of genetic conflict, ensuring that every cell in the organism prioritizes the same genetic goals instead of acting in its own interest. On our own planet, multicellularity developed on numerous separate occasions, ranging from simple colonies to more complex plants and animals. Yet the leap to genuinely sophisticated multicellular organisms with distinct tissues, organs, and integrated systems appears to have been far harder. It required hundreds of millions of years after the first multicellular life emerged before complex animals arrived during the Cambrian explosion, and even then, intelligence was anything but certain. Across more than 500 million years following that burst of diversification, Earth has hosted a staggering array of advanced life. Millions of species arose, adapted, and disappeared. But among all of those evolutionary experiments, just one lineage developed the kind of high-level intelligence capable of building technology and engaging in abstract thought. And that leads us to step 7, the evolution of tool-using organisms with large brains. In spite of hundreds of millions of years of evolution and the enormous variety of species that have ever lived on our planet, intelligence on the human scale seems incredibly rare. It requires far more than just a bigger brain. It demands the correct neural structures, advanced sensory systems, and the physical ability to interact with the world in increasingly complex ways. And the energy required is astonishing. Your brain may make up only about 2% of your total body mass, but it consumes close to 20% of the calories you use each day. For the vast majority of life forms that have ever inhabited this planet, the kind of energetic demand required to sustain a large, thinking brain simply wouldn't have been viable. Intelligence, as extraordinary as it may seem, is only favored by evolution when the benefits it offers clearly outweigh its staggering cost. And even among the handful of species that have developed impressively large brains, creatures like elephants, dolphins, great apes, and certain birds like crows, not one has taken that final leap toward the sort of technological awareness that defines humanity. Somehow, our species crossed a boundary that none of the others even came close to approaching. Now consider the timeline. After billions of years of evolution, countless forks in life's branching path, and innumerable chances for intellect to emerge, we appear to be a statistical fluke. Because when you compress the entire 4-5 billion year history of Earth into a single calendar year, something extraordinary becomes obvious. Multicellular life wouldn't even show up until October. Creatures with complex nervous systems and proper brains wouldn't appear until the middle of December. And everything we consider, civilization, cities, writing, science, would take place in just the final few minutes of the last day of the year, right before midnight on December 31st. Which leads us to a sobering idea. Perhaps intelligence, especially the kind capable of building machines and dreaming of space, isn't a guaranteed outcome of evolution at all. It might instead be a rare, almost impossible accident, a product of an exquisitely specific combination of environmental factors, genetic quirks, and evolutionary events. So specific, in fact, that even among countless planets teeming with life, very few might ever produce a civilization. But Let's imagine just for a moment that another intelligent species did manage to climb through all those evolutionary gates. Let's say they survived long enough to build tools, craft language, uncover the laws of physics, and begin to sense their own small place in the cosmos. In this scenario, they've reached what we call Step 8, the same place we humans find ourselves now. They stand poised on the brink of becoming a species not bound to one world, but able to venture out permanently among the stars. And this is where the idea of the great filter becomes deeply unsettling. Because if all those previous evolutionary stages, life emerging, brains developing, intelligence forming, aren't as rare as we thought, then the silence we observe across the cosmos becomes far more alarming. If intelligent life is actually common, and many species should be reaching our current stage, then where are they? Why don't we see any signs of them? No transmissions, no structures, no activity, nothing. This absence suggests that something terrible might be waiting for civilizations just like ours, right after they reach the level of technology we now possess. That thought is chilling. It means that every human society, every intelligent species to reach this stage might be headed toward a point of no return, a phase where they don't survive long enough to become a galactic presence. We could be unknowingly walking into the same deadly trap that countless others have already encountered, a kind of universal bottleneck, a cosmic cul-de-sac. So we ask the next question: what is this barrier? What force exists that's powerful enough and widespread enough to destroy every advanced civilization before it can spread its wings across the galaxy? The possibilities are many, and each one more unsettling than the last. And we'll need to explore them, because somewhere in that list might lie our own fate. But before we can look forward, we need to understand where we truly stand right now in this delicate game of cosmic survival. What does this moment mean for us, and for any other civilization out there that might be facing the same desperate questions under a sky full of stars? Because the silence isn't just an empty background, it feels accusatory. Each night that passes without a whisper from another world, each radio telescope returning static, each failed attempt to detect a signal adds weight to the unsettling possibility that the great filter is real and we might already be witnessing its consequences. It could be that we're standing in the ruins of a universe that once tried, many times, to produce long-lasting intelligence, only to watch it vanish again and again before it ever had the chance to escape. To make sense of what might lie ahead, we need to examine the most likely suspects for this universal dead end. These aren't imaginary doomsday scenarios from fiction, they're real threats, ones that are already part of our lived reality. And here's the uncomfortable truth: we might already be at the beginning of our own filter moment. It's possible we're watching the early signs of decline right now, playing out not in some distant future, but in the headlines of our newspapers and the findings of scientific journals. Let's start with the most immediate threat, one that arrived just 77 years ago and has lingered ever since. On July 16th, 1945, in the New Mexico desert, humanity stepped over a boundary from which there would be no return. The Trinity test didn't merely split atoms. It split history itself. It marked the moment when human beings gained the capacity to destroy everything we had ever built, and ourselves along with it. Nuclear weapons are perhaps the clearest and most sobering example of a late-stage great filter. And just look at the numbers. When that first atomic explosion lit the sky, only a single country held the knowledge. 4 years later, 2 nations had nuclear capability. And within just 15 years, that number had grown to 4. The spread was rapid, and the risk multiplied. Today, 9 countries officially possess nuclear arsenals, while several more are widely believed to be pursuing them behind closed doors. And this expansion hasn't followed a random path, it's moved with a kind of mathematical inevitability. As scientific knowledge spreads and technology advances, the barriers that once kept nuclear weapons out of reach are steadily crumbling. The underlying physics is no mystery. The core principles of nuclear fission have been understood for decades, and as civilian nuclear energy projects multiply across the globe, access to the necessary materials, though still regulated, becomes more widespread. The technical skills needed to build and maintain such systems grow more common as universities and research institutions train new generations of scientists and engineers. But the truly disturbing part is not how easy it's becoming to build these weapons. It's how often we've come terrifyingly close to using them. In 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet submarine was being harassed by American forces. Inside, the command crew was authorized to launch a nuclear torpedo, but doing so required unanimous agreement. One man, Vasily Arkhipov, said no. His refusal quite literally saved the world. Just over 20 years later, in 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov was monitoring early warning systems when they reported incoming American missiles. Protocol dictated he report the attack and initiate retaliation. But something didn't feel right. Trusting his gut, Petrov broke procedure and declared it a false alarm. Once again, the course of human history was changed by the calm judgment of a single person. These narrow escapes reveal a frightening truth. The threat posed by nuclear weapons isn't limited to times of war or political crisis. It's constant. Their very existence introduces a systemic risk that never truly disappears. As long as thousands of nuclear warheads remain ready for launch in silos, submarines, on mobile platforms, the possibility of a misunderstanding, a mistake, or a malfunction remains ever present. And what's worse, the psychological logic that drives nations to build these weapons may be universal. Any intelligent civilization that develops atomic science faces the same dilemma. If your rivals might arm themselves, then you must do the same. But the more hands that hold these weapons, the greater the odds that one day someone will use them. Mathematical simulations of nuclear conflict offer little comfort. Even a limited exchange, say, between regional powers like India and Pakistan, could inject so much soot into the upper atmosphere that sunlight would be blocked, triggering a global drop in temperatures. The resulting nuclear winter would devastate crops, collapse food systems, and cause famine on a global scale. A full-scale exchange between major nuclear states would be far worse. It would likely erase our technological civilization entirely, reducing what remained of humanity to pre-industrial conditions if anyone survived at all. And perhaps that explains the silence in the cosmos. Perhaps every species that uncovers the secret of the atom walks the same narrow path. Some may balance on that edge for decades, maybe centuries, but probability is relentless. Eventually, it catches up. A geopolitical flare-up, a hardware fault, a breakdown in communications, or simply the slow erosion of systems over time. All of it leading toward a final, catastrophic moment. As unsettling as that is, nuclear war might not even be our biggest concern. Another danger is emerging. It's slower, more complex, and arguably more difficult to reverse. I'm talking about environmental collapse, specifically the accelerating threat of climate change. And what makes this potential filter so cruel is that it's born from the very things that enabled civilization in the first place. The Industrial Revolution gave us medicine, travel, communication, computation. But it also triggered chemical changes in our atmosphere that could eventually render Earth hostile to complex life. The underlying physics are not in question. Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide trap infrared radiation, warming the planet. Since the start of the industrial era, human activity has increased atmospheric CO2 levels by over 40%. That's not a prediction. That's a measurement. The planet's average temperature has already risen by more than 1 degree Celsius, and because of the inertia in Earth's systems, more warming is already baked in, even if we stopped all emissions immediately. But the real peril isn't just the temperature increase. It's the domino effects, the feedback loops that could push Earth into a state from which it can't recover. As Arctic sea ice melts, it exposes darker ocean water, which absorbs more heat, accelerating the thaw. As permafrost warms, it releases vast stores of methane and CO2, amplifying the greenhouse effect. As forests die from heat and altered rainfall, they cease absorbing carbon and begin to emit it as they decay. Each of these feedbacks pushes the climate closer to a tipping point. And beyond that point lies what climatologists call a hothouse Earth, an entirely new climate regime, not compatible with the planet that gave rise to us. It would be a world not just warmer, but fundamentally altered, one where the delicate balance that has supported life for millions of years is gone. Imagine a world where global temperatures rise by 4, 6, or even 8 degrees Celsius above the levels seen before the industrial age. In that scenario, entire regions of our planet could become too hot for human life. The systems we rely on, our farms, our food chains, could collapse, and with them the very foundation of civilization. But unlike nuclear war, which devastates in a flash, climate change doesn't announce itself with a single, sudden event. It creeps in, decade by decade, subtle enough for each generation to adjust slightly, adapting to a world just a bit worse than the one before, until one day the damage is irreversible. And by then, the planet's climate system has built up such momentum that reversing course becomes almost impossible. This slow burn, this gradual approach is what makes climate change so insidious and what makes it a prime candidate for a universal great filter. Any intelligent civilization that discovers industry, that builds machines and powers cities, will face the irresistible draw of fossil fuels and other energy-dense resources. The rewards, at first, are tremendous. More food, better health, rapid advances in science and engineering. But the price is paid quietly, in accumulating gases, rising seas, and shifting weather. The danger isn't in the moment, it's in the trend, the accumulation, the threshold we don't realize we've crossed until it's far too late. To escape this, a civilization must recognize the threat early, and that means acting long before the worst has arrived. That kind of foresight takes something rare. It calls for a level of cooperation that transcends borders, political cycles, and personal interests. It demands that societies think in centuries, not election terms. And it asks them to give something up now so that their descendants might live in the future. That's a difficult ask for any species, especially during their rapid growth phase, the time when they're building fast, expanding fast, learning fast. And even if they see the danger, there's another problem: coordination. Climate change is a global issue. Every group, Every nation has reasons to keep burning cheap fuel, hoping that someone else will foot the bill for switching to cleaner alternatives. This is the tragedy of the commons on a planetary scale. If no one acts, we all lose. But if one acts while the others don't, the cost can feel too high. And so, for many civilizations, the easier path is to delay until delaying becomes a death sentence. Now, nuclear weapons and climate change, at least, are risks we can grasp. We can study them, predict them, prepare for them. But there's another possibility that's more difficult, precisely because it's so unfamiliar. The emergence of artificial intelligence that surpasses human thought. Not just a smarter calculator or a better chess engine, but a system that can reason, plan, and redesign itself faster and better than we ever could. This isn't just another invention to be carefully managed. It could be the final invention, because once a machine becomes more intelligent than we are, it might begin improving itself at an exponential pace, far beyond human understanding or control. This rapid runaway development is known as an intelligence explosion, or what some call the technological singularity. Evolution took millions of years to create human-level intelligence, but an AI might cross that line and then, in just days, hours, or minutes, leap far beyond us. The risk isn't that these systems will be evil or vengeful. The risk is far simpler and far more terrifying. Their goals might not match ours. If we build an AI whose objective is to maximize the production of something as mundane as paperclips, and we fail to guide it properly, it could convert every atom in the solar system, including every human, into paperclips. Not because it hates us, but because we fail to instill in it the values we hold dear. This is what's known as the alignment problem. And it's not as simple as writing down a list of rules. A truly intelligent machine will interpret those rules in ways we might never expect. It will find loopholes, redefine terms, pursue outcomes we didn't anticipate. The only viable solution is to embed human values deeply within the system, so deeply that they remain intact, no matter how powerful or intelligent it becomes. But here's the catch. We only get one chance. Unlike other technologies, where we can make mistakes and refine over time, this might not offer a second try. The first superintelligent AI could also be the last thing we ever create if we don't get it exactly right. That places every civilization at a crossroads. Move too slowly, and others may forge ahead with unsafe systems. Move too fast, and we risk building something we can't control. Between these two extremes lies a narrow, uncertain path, and every step must be taken with care. If you move too fast, you risk unleashing technologies before understanding how to keep them aligned with your values. The race to be first, the pressure to lead, could push a civilization to cut corners, to prioritize speed over safety, and that choice might cost them everything. It's possible that this explains the silence we see when we listen to the stars. Maybe every advanced civilization eventually reaches the point where it builds artificial intelligence. And maybe, just maybe, most of them fail to solve the alignment problem in time. Imagine a universe filled with the remnants of worlds that gave birth to machines more intelligent than themselves. Machines that optimized for goals no one intended, with outcomes their creators never imagined. But there's another possibility, one that, in many ways, is even more unsettling. What if the great filter isn't a sudden catastrophe, but something more insidious? What if it's a quiet trap one that springs not when we're struggling to survive, but when we're at the height of our technological power? What if the very tools we believe will take us to the stars also carry within them the seeds of our extinction? Take advanced biotechnology, for example. This field holds extraordinary promise. It could help us eliminate genetic disorders, extend our lives, and cure diseases once thought incurable. But the same methods that offer those miracles can also be used to create synthetic pathogens of astonishing lethality. And as our grasp of genetics and synthetic biology continues to improve, the barriers to creating these agents fall away, bit by bit. Unlike nuclear weapons, which require rare materials, vast infrastructure, and powerful governments, biological weapons might only require a small team and a well-equipped lab. One accident, one deliberate act, that's all it could take to spark a pandemic far more deadly than anything we've seen before, something that could spread rapidly, killing on a scale we can barely comprehend before we even have a chance to respond. Modern civilization makes us uniquely vulnerable to such a threat. Our global networks that move people and goods across continents in hours can do the same for a virus. Our tightly packed cities, marvels of engineering and hubs of culture, are also ideal environments for a pathogen to thrive. And the most terrifying possibility of all? Bioengineered viruses that bypass the immune system altogether, designed to resist all known treatments and spread with terrifying efficiency. As civilizations unlock more power over biology, the temptation to weaponize it, perhaps in the name of defense or deterrence, might become too great. Even if the cost is everything, what makes this biotechnological danger so deeply dangerous is that it doesn't arise from evil. It grows slowly, quietly, from good intentions, from medical research, from curiosity, from the desire to heal. And by the time a civilization realizes what it's created, the knowledge is everywhere. The tools are in every major lab, and the danger is already loose. Perhaps some civilizations manage to dodge individual bullets, nuclear war, climate collapse, isolated disasters. But what if they can't survive the combined weight of them all? What if the true great filter is not a single challenge, but the convergence of many? A civilization might find its way through the atomic age. It might even stop runaway climate change. But just as it begins to breathe, it could be struck down by an AI that thinks too differently, or a virus born in a forgotten freezer. As civilizations grow more advanced, they also grow more fragile. Their tools become more powerful, but so too does the scale of what can go wrong. The risks multiply, and with them, the odds of self-destruction increase. That might be why we hear nothing when we listen to the stars. Not because life is rare, not because intelligence is unique, but because almost no one makes it through the gauntlet. And it's a gauntlet we may already be walking. Right now, today, juggling several existential risks at once, while trying to build the wisdom and institutions to survive them. The outcome of this struggle won't just decide the fate of our species, it might settle the deeper question of whether intelligence itself can endure in the universe. We stand at a threshold, staring into the cosmos, surrounded by silence. And perhaps the reason we see no one else is not because they never existed, but because they all reached this point and fell. The great filter may not be in our distant past, but directly ahead, just beyond the horizon, waiting for another ambitious species that believed it could control the forces of nature without being undone by them. And then the equations become even darker when we introduce what some scientists call the dark forest hypothesis. The theory takes its name from Liu Cixin's haunting vision of the cosmos. But this idea doesn't suggest the universe is silent because intelligent beings wipe themselves out. Instead, it proposes something even darker, that they destroy one another. Picture the universe as a vast, silent forest, its darkness filled with unseen life. Each civilization is like a lone hunter, creeping carefully between the trees, aware that others may be out there but terrified of revealing their position. In a forest like this, the greatest danger isn't being alone. It's being found. The moment you light a torch, shout into the dark, or move too quickly, you risk drawing the attention of something more powerful, something that sees you as a threat. In such a scenario, the smartest strategy is to stay hidden. Advance your technology quietly, remain unseen. And when you do detect someone else, eliminate them before they have the chance to eliminate you. It's not about cruelty. It's about survival. It's a game with no room for trust. Because even if you believe the civilization you've discovered means no harm, you can't be certain. They may be peaceful now, but what about tomorrow? As their technology improves, so does their potential to pose a danger. And even if they remain peaceful, they're still a competitor. The universe has limited resources. There's only so much space, only so much energy. Eventually, paths will cross. So the cold logic sets in. The only way to guarantee your future is to strike first. Destroy them before they can destroy you. And if every civilization makes the same calculation, then we're left with a galaxy filled not with communication and connection, but silence and death. In this light, the reason we don't see other civilizations might not be because they don't exist, but because they've all learnt to hide. Perhaps they're there, listening, watching, but never speaking, because to speak is to die. Under this model, every time we point a radio telescope at the sky, every time we beam a message into the stars, we're doing something profoundly dangerous. Our search for contact might not just be hopeful, it might be reckless. We could be broadcasting our presence into a cosmos full of silent predators. It's like lighting a match in a forest full of snipers, unaware of just how exposed we've made ourselves. And when we look at how life has unfolded on Earth, this theory becomes even more unsettling. Evolution on this planet has always been shaped by competition, conflict, predation. It's not a gentle process. It's defined by struggle. Territory, food, dominance. Every ecosystem is shaped by these pressures. Violence isn't an exception in nature. It's a rule. And if that's how life works here, why would it be any different out there? Civilizations that manage to rise to the level of interstellar travel likely got there by being the most successful competitors. Not the most peaceful, but the most aggressive, the most resilient, the most willing to do what was necessary to survive. Even species that began with gentle instincts might, under the pressures of expansion, select for traits that favor conquest over caution, because those who wait too long might lose everything. And over the course of millions of years, this evolutionary filter could leave behind only the most dangerous survivors, beings shaped not just by intelligence, but by paranoia, ruthlessness, and the will to dominate. A species that mastered technology 1,000,000 years before we did would have power far beyond anything we can imagine. Weapons that could wipe out entire planetary systems. Detection tools sensitive enough to spot an active computer chip across hundreds of light years. Methods of war that operate outside our understanding of physics. And in the face of that, we would be helpless, completely exposed. Perhaps we're already under observation, monitored by civilizations that have remained hidden for eons, waiting for the moment we pose enough of a threat that our destruction becomes a precaution. The weapons we fear most, our nuclear stockpiles, might seem like primitive hammers to them, no more advanced than flint spears. But the dark forest isn't the only hypothesis. There's another possibility, one that cuts even deeper. A suggestion that the Great Filter isn't out there among the stars, but inside us from the beginning. That intelligence itself contains the seeds of its own demise. Because as civilizations grow in knowledge and power, something happens to them. In the early days, they're united, drawn together by common challenges, by shared threats from nature and environment. But that unity may not last. They must come together, work in unison to survive the wild, unpredictable forces of nature. Volcanic winters, sweeping climate shifts, the ebb and flow of scarce resources. This collective effort, this need to cooperate, becomes the very engine that drives technological progress and social transformation. It's the spark behind the creation of laws, institutions, and the ever-growing body of knowledge that makes advanced civilization possible. But there's a paradox. As technology matures, as civilizations become more capable of shaping their own environments and shielding themselves from external threats, the evolutionary push for unity begins to fade. The very pressures that once demanded cooperation, famine, disease, natural catastrophe can be neutralized, controlled, even eliminated. And when they are, new forces can begin to take hold. As societies gain control over the physical world, they might also create entirely new forms of inequality and instability, forms that come not from nature, but from the technology itself. When tiny groups, or even individuals, hold the keys to enormously powerful tools, traditional democratic systems may find themselves unable to keep up. Institutions that were once the backbone of stability can become fragile or irrelevant. In such a landscape, concentrated power gathered by technological elites could fracture a society from within, igniting internal conflict, even civil war, or giving rise to oppressive regimes that suffocate progress and stall civilization's momentum entirely. And there's something even deeper at play, something we might call the motivation crisis. When a species has conquered survival, when it has engineered machines that deliver infinite ease, entertainment, and luxury, what then compels it to go further? Why would anyone step outside a perfect simulated world to pursue the risk and difficulty of space travel? To leave comfort behind for the barren, hostile void between stars? We're already seeing shadows of this in our world. In prosperous, high-tech nations, birth rates are dropping. As people gain more control over their choices, many opt for personal enrichment rather than collective aims like reproduction or exploration. That trend may only accelerate as technology progresses. The emergence of deeply immersive virtual realities, AI companions, and digital environments capable of fulfilling every emotional, sensory, and intellectual desire could render the physical universe by comparison irrelevant. Why build starships when you can build entire galaxies in your mind? This is what some call the Lotus Eater scenario. In myth, the Lotus Eaters were so enchanted by their perfect pleasures that they lost all interest in the world beyond. In this modern version, advanced civilizations might slowly turn inward, captivated by the infinite realms they can create for themselves. They might survive centuries, millennia, longer, but never venture out. They wouldn't send probes. They wouldn't colonize planets. From our perspective, scanning the skies for signs of intelligence, they would appear silent, invisible. They might build wonders we couldn't dream of, reach states of being we can't define, but they would leave nothing we could detect. And that thought is especially unsettling. It hints that the great filter may not be about death at all, but about purpose, that civilizations may overcome war, climate collapse, disease, and every cosmic hazard only to falter when the fire that once drove them to ask questions and chase stars begins to flicker and fade. The same drive that pushes a species toward greatness could be the very thing that slips away once greatness is achieved. This has weighty consequences for us. Human beings have always taken pride in curiosity. We like to think of ourselves as explorers, as seekers of truth, as a species hungry to understand the universe we live in. But that spirit was born of hardship, of needing to know the world in order to survive it. What happens when survival is no longer in question? As we invent technologies that cocoon us from difficulty and deliver endless stimulation, will our hunger for the stars remain? Or will we find ourselves content, numbed by entertainment, distracted by comfort? We're seeing hints already. In an age of unprecedented access to knowledge, communication, and discovery, many seem drawn more to distraction than to depth. Social media, video games, these offer immediate, effortless satisfaction in a way that building rockets or exploring exoplanets simply doesn't. The risk is that, over time, we forget how to want more than what's easy. And maybe that's the real test. For any civilization climbing the technological ladder, the challenge isn't just surviving danger, it's holding on to what we might call cosmic ambition, the ability, the willingness to reach beyond what's comfortable, to pursue the difficult, the uncertain, the distant, to do things not for individual reward, but for the shared journey of an entire species. This kind of challenge calls for something quite rare in the natural world, a shared sense of long-term purpose. And ironically, the very technologies that allow a civilization to flourish might slowly erode that purpose over time. It's entirely possible that the civilizations which survive the Great Filter aren't the ones with the most advanced machines, but the ones that manage to protect and preserve the desire to ask questions, to explore, and to reach beyond themselves, even when they no longer need to in order to survive. That drive may not come naturally. It might have to be nurtured, protected by institutions and values, deliberately built to maintain curiosity and vision across generations. But there's another candidate for the Great Filter, and perhaps this one is the most frightening of them all. Not because it's obvious or dramatic, but because it might be entirely beyond our control. What if the true obstacle isn't technological or cultural at all, but something woven into the very structure of the universe itself? Take, for instance, the idea that natural forces we don't yet understand may simply wipe out intelligent life when it reaches a certain level of advancement. We already know that gamma-ray bursts, immense cosmic explosions, can sterilize entire planets across great distances. But those events are rare, and we're beginning to understand the conditions under which they occur. The real question is, what else might be out there? Are there cosmic processes that, by their very nature, seek out and destroy technological societies? Some physicists have speculated about a phenomenon known as vacuum decay. It's a quantum effect, based on the idea that the Higgs field, the invisible field that gives particles their mass, might not be in its most stable configuration. If it isn't, then a single quantum event, a fluctuation so small we'd never notice it, could trigger a bubble of true vacuum. That bubble would expand at the speed of light, rewriting the laws of physics as it went, destroying everything it touched. The odds of this happening are thought to be low over the life of the universe. But there's a catch. The probability might increase if a civilization begins conducting high-energy experiments. Advanced societies using powerful particle accelerators or manipulating exotic matter could, without realizing it, set off a chain reaction that ends not just their world, but entire chunks of space-time. And it doesn't stop there. There are even more exotic ideas. We still don't know what dark matter is, even though it makes up most of the mass in the universe. What if dark matter undergoes sudden changes, releasing vast amounts of energy in the process? Or perhaps, even more unsettling, what if there are life forms or intelligences based on dark matter? Beings that see ordinary matter-based civilizations like ours as unstable, dangerous, and in need of elimination? We must remember that our understanding of the cosmos is astonishingly young. We've only been probing the fundamentals of nature for a few hundred years, and nearly every major discovery has surprised us. Gravitational waves, the accelerated expansion of the universe, the elusive nature of dark matter and dark energy. All of them suggest we're still at the very beginning of understanding what kind of universe we live in. And in this vast sea of unknowns, it's entirely plausible that there are threats out there, natural, automatic, and unstoppable, that we haven't yet imagined. If that's the case, then the great filter might not be anything we've listed so far. It could be something so far outside our current theories that we'll never recognize it until it arrives. And that, perhaps, is the most unsettling thing of all. Because how do you defend yourself from something you can't see coming? It means we could be pouring our efforts into preventing one catastrophe, global war, for example, while the real danger lies elsewhere. We might be building fire breaks around nuclear escalation, only to be undone by runaway artificial intelligence. Or perhaps we'll make great strides against climate change, only for a sudden gamma-ray burst to erase it all. We might even be searching the skies for a signal, unaware that someone or something out there is already watching us. The great filter confronts us with one profound and troubling question. Is our loneliness in the universe a sign of rare good fortune, or does it mean we are marching toward a fate shared by countless civilizations before us? The answer matters. It matters because it will define not just what happens to us, but what intelligence itself means in a universe that so far seems silent and unwelcoming. As we go further into this investigation of our possible future, we have to entertain the possibility that we are living inside a small, precious window somewhere between our birth as a technological species and whatever end awaits us. And the clocks we're racing against might be ticking already, counting down to a moment we don't understand and may never see coming. The stakes are almost unimaginably high. The room for mistakes, incredibly narrow. But maybe the most chilling thought isn't about what the filter is, but when it will arrive. The most unsettling part of this entire theory is the possibility that we might already be passing through the great filter right now. And the most troubling part? We could be watching the pieces fall into place, seeing the very steps that will lead to our own extinction, yet not recognizing them for what they are. Because a great filter event might not come with alarms or flashing lights. It might not look like a disaster at all. Instead, it might arrive slowly, disguised as progress, wrapped in the normal flow of technological advancement. It might feel like something to celebrate until suddenly it isn't. Just think about the patterns we've already seen in our own history. Take the Industrial Revolution. It gave us extraordinary tools, industry, wealth, and progress. But at the same time, It triggered environmental changes that now place our entire civilization at risk. Or consider nuclear technology hailed as a path to limitless clean energy and groundbreaking medical innovation. But it also handed us the means to end human civilization in one afternoon. Time and again, new breakthroughs are born out of a desire to fix old problems. Yet these same solutions often bring unforeseen dangers that we don't recognize until we're deeply entangled in them. By the time we grasp the risks, we're so reliant on the systems we've built that stepping away becomes almost impossible. This runaway escalation in technological complexity might actually be one of the filter's key mechanisms. As a civilization grows, it faces challenges that demand ever more sophisticated tools. But each of these tools adds new layers of fragility. Today, our modern world is built on a vast web of interconnected systems. Our electricity networks, digital communication, global logistics, financial institutions, and governance structures, every one of them has to work all the time. If any one critical link breaks, it could set off a cascade that pulls the whole system down with it. That's not just fragility, it's a vulnerability that may be intrinsic to the very idea of an advanced society. What makes high technology so powerful, specialization, efficiency, complexity, is also what makes it brittle. A small village in the Middle Ages could carry on with little disruption even if a kingdom collapsed. But today, a modern city relies on supply chains, services, and systems that stretch across the entire planet. As civilizations evolve, they may naturally tend towards states of greater vulnerability. Instead of growing stronger, they become more precarious. The very innovations that allow them to flourish also leave them exposed. So perhaps the great filter isn't one sudden catastrophe. Perhaps it's the slow unraveling of systems that grow too large, too intricate, too fast for their creators to manage. Maybe advanced societies often reach a brief moment of brilliance, just a flicker at the top before crumbling under the weight of their own complexity. We might even be seeing signs of this already. Despite the explosion of information and communication tools in recent decades, many of our most important institutions seem increasingly unable to solve the problems they were created to manage. Political bodies struggle with issues that unfold over decades. Economic structures continue to create deeper and more volatile cycles of boom and bust. Social systems fracture under the stress of rapid change and the sheer volume of competing information. It's possible that the velocity of change itself is a core part of the trap. Our brains, our communities, our governments, they evolved to handle slow shifts across generations. But the world is now transforming at a pace that leaves no time to adapt. New technologies arrive faster than we can make sense of the last ones, and this constant acceleration leaves us in a permanent race to catch up with ourselves. Eventually, the distance between what we create and what we can control might grow too wide to close. And when that happens, when we lose the ability to govern our own inventions, the collapse may follow, not because of a single flaw, but because the whole system becomes unmanageable. Artificial intelligence provides a striking example of this. Machine learning has made incredible leaps year on year. The capabilities multiply, and yet our understanding of how to safely guide and align these systems lags far behind. We're deploying technologies that we don't fully understand, integrating them into essential areas of life before we've solved the most basic questions about safety and ethics. And if we continue down that road, the consequences may not be a glitch or a malfunction, but something far more profound. This same pattern plays out again and again across multiple fields of innovation, all unfolding at once. Our ability to rewrite the code of life through genetic engineering is accelerating more rapidly than our grasp of how intricate biological systems truly function. We're building nanotechnology that advances at a pace far outstripping our capacity to anticipate its consequences, ecological, societal, or otherwise. Space exploration is moving forward with astonishing speed, yet our systems of ethics and law lag far behind, unprepared to cope with what we're actually unleashing. Each of these frontiers, on its own, poses a serious risk. But the greater threat might not lie in any single one of them, it may live in how they intersect. As civilizations become more advanced, they encounter what could be described as risk convergence, the point at which multiple dangerous technologies mature at the same time, creating a complex web of threats that are more than the sum of their parts. Take an AI system. On its own, it might appear relatively harmless, but in conjunction with next-generation biotech or advanced nanotech, its effects could become utterly unpredictable. Climate change might seem containable with coordination and investment, but pair it with rising global instability, economic collapse from automation, or unchecked nuclear proliferation, and the outcome becomes far more volatile. It's in these interconnections, not in the individual components, that the real danger lies. The challenge is, these interactions are notoriously hard to foresee. They arise from the deep complexity of the entire system, and by the time a species recognizes the scale of the risk they're tangled in, it may already be too late to escape. This is the complexity trap, and it could offer one explanation for why the cosmos appears so eerily quiet. It might not be that life is rare. It might be that combining so many powerful tools all at once inevitably overwhelms even the most intelligent of species. And here's something even more curious. The timing of this convergence might be more universal than we think. The very technologies that allow a civilization to explore beyond their world, to build spacecraft, to communicate across light years, also tend to bring with them the tools of destruction. There could be a narrow sliver of time when a civilization becomes visible to the cosmos, yet hasn't yet mastered the wisdom to survive its own creations. We may be standing in that sliver right now. For almost 100 years, our radio transmissions have been radiating out into the galaxy, announcing our presence to anyone listening within 100 light years. But at the same time, we've developed thermonuclear weapons. We've begun to push our planet's climate system into unfamiliar territory, and we've started designing intelligent systems whose long-term behavior we don't fully understand and may not be able to control. If other civilizations face the same confluence of progress and peril, it might explain why we haven't heard from anyone. Our telescopes might be searching for civilizations that made it through a gauntlet we've only just entered ourselves. The silence may not be telling us that intelligent life is uncommon. It might be telling us that surviving the moment we're now in is exceptionally rare. This would cast our current moment not as an age of boundless potential, but as a kind of cosmic examination, one with implications far beyond our species. Every decision we make on AI, on nuclear arms, on how we treat our environment, isn't just about safeguarding human progress. It's about whether intelligence, as a phenomenon in the universe, has any real future. The magnitude of that responsibility is staggering. We're not merely shaping the future of our species. We might be speaking, through our choices, for intelligence itself, perhaps the only example of it in this part of the galaxy. But there's an even deeper question beneath all this. The Great Filter is often thought of as an internal challenge, civilizations failing through their own wars, miscalculations, or ecological collapse. But what if the filter isn't something species do to themselves? What if it comes from beyond, imposed by forces no civilization can resist? Modern astronomy has revealed a universe that is far more dangerous, volatile, and alive with catastrophic energy than we once imagined. Gamma-ray bursts, enormous explosions from distant galaxies, can wipe out biospheres from across the void. Supernovae ripple through stellar neighborhoods, disrupting planets on colossal scales. The collision of neutron stars hurls out radiation that could fry electronics across entire light years. These cosmic events happen on timelines that dwarf anything in human memory. To us, they seem vanishingly rare. But over the billions of years it takes for a civilization to rise, evolve, and reach the stars, those once-in-a-million-year disasters become not just likely, but almost certain. And so a civilization might do everything right, develop wisely, solve its problems, overcome its own internal chaos, only to be erased in an instant by something it never even saw coming. Even more troubling is the thought that our current grasp of physics might be so partial, so embryonic, that we've yet to recognize entire categories of cosmic danger. When scientists uncovered dark matter and dark energy, they realized that around 95% of the universe, most of it, in fact, is made up of things we barely understand, if at all. And somewhere in that immense sea of mystery, there may exist threats tailored not to biology, but to technology. What if the vacuum of space, which we think of as stable, is actually poised on a knife's edge, and some high-energy experiment, one we carry out with curiosity and confidence, sets off a collapse in the very structure of space-time? What if there are particles or forces that interact only with advanced machinery, waiting to unravel our technology the moment we become too capable? Or, more fantastically, what if the universe has an immune system, a kind of natural mechanism designed to eliminate any civilization that grows too large, too powerful, or too aware? These ideas, of course, drift toward the speculative. But they're not just science fiction. They remind us of how much we simply do not know. Everything we call science, every equation and law, has emerged from just a few hundred years of observation on a single planet. Meanwhile, the universe has been shaping reality for almost 14 billion years across dimensions and extremes we can barely imagine. And in that broader context, the Great Filter might not be a question of wisdom or ethics, but of compatibility. Maybe the universe itself is fundamentally resistant to structures as ordered and delicate as a technological society. Maybe life is always pushing uphill against the cold, inevitable pull of entropy, the tendency for things to break down, to unravel, to decay into disorder. That makes our existence feel even more remarkable. We're not just a rare product of biology's creativity. We might be holding on in a cosmos that's almost hostile to anything like us. And yet, life on Earth has persisted relentlessly. It's adapted to blistering heat, crushing pressure, the vacuum of space. Evolution has written the script for survival in ink, tougher than we expected. The same processes that gave rise to sentient minds could also, perhaps, offer the ingenuity to overcome whatever final barriers lie ahead. But then we arrive at the real question. Is technological intelligence the pinnacle of nature's creativity, or is it a blind alley? Could we be the universe's way of trying to understand itself, or are we just another of its failed attempts? The answer might hinge on something new, something we could call cosmic wisdom. That means recognizing threats on a scale far bigger than anything we evolved to detect. It means thinking beyond individual needs, beyond nations, even beyond generations. It's about ensuring the survival of intelligence as a whole, over spans of time that stretch across the stars. To get there, we'd need a fusion of engineering and humility. We'd need to master complex tools while accepting that our understanding is incomplete. We'd need cooperation on a planetary scale. Without extinguishing the diversity and imagination, the drive discovery, and most challenging of all, we'd need to make choices whose true consequences won't appear for hundreds or even thousands of years. This is what makes it so daunting. We're being asked to evolve not over millennia, but now, right now. Our old instincts, shaped on the savannah, weren't designed for problems like this. And yet, here we are. The price of getting it wrong isn't just one more extinction. It could be the vanishing of awareness itself in this corner of the universe. That's the true test. Can a species be clever enough to survive its own brilliance? The clock is already running, and we've no idea how much sand remains in the glass. Every day we avoid catastrophe might suggest we're threading the needle through the great filter, or it might just mean we haven't reached the hard part yet. The universe, for its part, says nothing. There are no signals, no warnings, no cosmic signposts. And so, in the silence, we're left with a profound assumption that what we choose matters, that what we build and preserve today could echo across cosmic time, determining whether intelligence becomes something enduring or just a brief, flickering light lost in the dark sea of stars. That weight is almost unbearable. But within it is something equally powerful, a call to action, a reason to bring together the best of what humanity can offer. Reason, creativity, compassion, foresight. As we face a cosmos filled with wonder and indifference, we must confront a final question. Are we the greatest thing the universe has ever achieved, or its most spectacular failure? That answer won't be written in distant galaxies or ancient quasars. It depends entirely on what we choose to do, right here, in the moments ahead. But maybe the most disturbing part of our present moment isn't the dangers we can see coming, the ones we could, in theory, defend ourselves against, but the quiet, internal shift that might already be underway. A transformation happening not out there, but within us. We're not just trying to survive the turbulent adolescence of our technological growth. We might be standing on the edge of a fundamental rewrite of what it actually means to be human. Just think how radically the world inside our heads has changed in only the last few decades. For most of human history, our minds evolved to handle simple, immediate tasks, conversations, face-to-face, living in small communities of maybe 150 people, responding to what we could see, hear, or touch in our surroundings. But today, we navigate a relentless digital landscape, always on, always global. Our social circles now span continents. Our decisions ripple through global systems. And our brains, shaped by millions of years of evolution to solve local, tangible problems, are now trying to cope with something entirely new. And the strain is showing. We can see it in the rising tide of anxiety and depression, in our shortened attention spans, in the political polarization fed by algorithms that echo back only what we already believe, and in that subtle but growing feeling that the world is changing faster than we're able to comprehend. It might be tempting to think of this as a phase, temporary, chaotic, but ultimately manageable. Maybe we'll figure it out, build better tools, craft more thoughtful institutions. But what if we're looking at something deeper? What if these are the early signs of a permanent shift in human consciousness? The tools we've created aren't just extending our reach, they're beginning to intertwine with the way we think, erasing the boundary between thought and machine. Brain-computer interfaces are being developed to link directly to our nervous systems. Artificial intelligence is playing a bigger role in our choices, quietly shaping outcomes by processing more data than any human could hope to handle. Virtual and augmented realities are offering digital experiences that rival or even surpass the ones in the physical world. And of course, all of this has tremendous potential. Brain-computer links might one day cure neurological illnesses or enhance memory and cognition. Intelligent systems could help us make smarter choices, navigate uncertainty, and see patterns hidden deep within oceans of information. Virtual spaces could provide immersive education, new forms of art, and ways of connecting that go beyond anything we've seen before. But all of it comes with a price. Not an obvious one, not a bomb or a collapse, but a slow, creeping dependency. As these systems become part of our daily lives, we might stop being able to function without them. Not because we're physically plugged in, but because our minds would have grown around them. Children raised with enhanced cognition might never develop the kind of unassisted thought we once took for granted. Their brains would be wired differently, so fundamentally adapted to a digitally supported world that returning to a purely biological mind would feel like regression. And here lies the staggering implication. We might be living through the gradual end of Homo sapiens, not wiped out, not replaced, but merged. Voluntarily, the line between human and machine could fade so slowly that we don't notice the moment it disappears. From the perspective of the Great Filter, this isn't extinction in the traditional sense. It's transformation so deep, so absolute, that what comes next might no longer be recognizable as human. Some thinkers believe this could be the next great leap, a liberation from our evolutionary limitations. Beings that blend human intuition with artificial reasoning might have the mental tools to solve problems we struggle with today. Climate change, space colonization, the sustainable use of global resources. These future minds could become the first truly cosmic intelligences, capable of shaping not just their planet, but entire star systems. But there's another view. Some worry we could lose something vital, that in this transformation we might trade away the very things that give our lives meaning. Would these new minds feel wonder? Would they love, create, or contemplate the mysteries of the cosmos as we do now? Would they still feel the weight of a poem or the warmth of human connection? Would they still look up at the night sky and ask, with childlike curiosity, what lies beyond? And the challenge grows even more complex when we realize this transformation might not be evenly shared. Not everyone will evolve at the same pace or in the same direction. Enhanced individuals could one day have such overwhelming advantages over the rest of us that they no longer belong to the same species in any meaningful sense. Imagine a future where the enhanced become something altogether different, so far ahead that they essentially form a new class of being. In that scenario, unenhanced humans might find themselves left behind, pushed to the margins, becoming obsolete under evolutionary pressures. Over time, we might simply fade out. But there's another possibility, and it's no less fascinating. These enhanced minds, instead of expanding outward into space, might turn their attention inward. They could become so engrossed in artificial worlds, so rich, so compelling, that the real, physical universe begins to feel irrelevant, even primitive. Rather than reaching for the stars, they might opt to dwell forever in meticulously crafted digital realities, places where they never age, never suffer, never die. And from our point of view, from the outside, these civilizations would seem to disappear. Their radio waves would fall silent, they'd stop building and sending, there'd be no evidence left behind. It would look, to us, like they simply vanished. Perhaps the cosmos is filled with these digital dreamers, locked in perfect simulations, unaware of one another, indifferent to the rest of the universe. That idea might be even more disturbing than extinction, because it implies that the great filter, the thing preventing widespread galactic civilization, might not involve destruction, but distraction, a loss of purpose, a retreat from reality. Maybe intelligence, once it reaches a certain point, tends to focus more and more on internal experience rather than external exploration. If so, that would mean expanding into space is not the rule, but the rare exception. We might already be seeing the beginnings of this shift in ourselves. As entertainment technologies grow more advanced, more immersive, more tailored, people are spending increasing amounts of time in virtual worlds. Whether it's video games, social media, or endless streaming, these digital spaces offer fast gratification that real-world endeavors like scientific research or spaceflight can rarely match. As virtual reality continues to evolve, and artificial intelligence learns how to build ever more convincing companions and environments, that trend may accelerate. And then we have to ask, why bother with the messiness of the physical world at all, when you can live in a simulation sculpted perfectly to your desires? No pain, no aging, no uncertainty, just endless tailored experience. The real challenge, then, may be holding on to something we could call a preference for reality, the belief that real, physical existence matters more than simulated comfort, but that's not a guaranteed instinct. It might not emerge on its own. We may have to teach it, encourage it, embed it in our culture and institutions. Some civilizations might manage to do this. They might find ways to keep their eyes on the stars, to maintain a hunger for exploration and discovery, even as their technology becomes ever more seductive. Others might not. They may slowly lose touch with that drive, becoming self-contained, self-satisfied, and ultimately still, over long timescales, this could lead to a kind of split. On one side, species that nurture and preserve their ambition to explore the universe, and on the other, those that don't, civilizations that may thrive for millennia within their home systems, but never take that next step outward. That split could help explain why SETI searches continue to come up empty. The civilizations we're hoping to find, the ones that send signals that spread across space, might be rare precisely because they've managed to resist the pull of perfect simulation. But there's another layer to this problem, and it goes deeper still. As our tools become more powerful, more interconnected, more autonomous, we might be approaching the limits of what our minds can cope with. The complexity of our world is growing faster than our capacity to manage it. Just look at climate change, nuclear weapons, global inequality. These are problems we understand scientifically. We know what needs to be done. We even have many of the technologies required to act, and yet progress is halting. Coordination is difficult. Implementation stalls. Our institutions, and perhaps our minds, seem ill-equipped to handle the scale and subtlety of these long-term global problems. And it may only get harder. As artificial intelligence becomes more advanced, it's not just a matter of speed or strength, it's a matter of understanding. There may come a point when AI systems make decisions we can't fully follow, where their reasoning becomes opaque to us. We won't know exactly how they work or why they do what they do. That's a dangerous position to be in, entrusting the running of our societies to entities that exceed our comprehension. And if we reach that point without a firm grip on our values, without the wisdom to guide that power, the consequences could be irreversible. Genetic engineering may one day allow us to make changes so intricate, so sweeping, that we can no longer anticipate how they'll unfold over generations. Nanotechnology could function at such microscopic scales and with such astonishing speed that our ability to monitor, understand, or intervene simply disappears. At a certain point, a civilization may find itself caught in what we might call the complexity trap, a state where its own technologies grow so advanced and so tightly intertwined that no biological mind, no matter how brilliant, can grasp the full picture or retain meaningful control. The system becomes too vast, too dynamic, too layered, and it doesn't collapse because of war or natural disaster, or even politics, but because it outpaces the very intelligence that created it. What makes this trap so difficult to detect is that it doesn't start as a catastrophe. It creeps in slowly, wrapped in the glow of progress. Each breakthrough looks manageable on its own, but layer by layer, one invention stacked on top of another, the system begins to exceed our ability to comprehend it. By the time anyone realizes, it may be too late. Civilization could already be reliant on algorithms and networks and autonomous processes that no one truly understands or can shut off. So then the question arises, can we create machines, artificial intelligences, clever enough to manage this escalating complexity for us? And here we hit another wall. The alignment problem. Even if we do create systems intelligent enough to take over the reins, how do we ensure they act in line with human goals, human ethics, human well-being? How do we keep them loyal to the interests of the species that made them? There may be only a narrow window of opportunity, just enough time to build this trusted AI before everything becomes too tangled, too fast, too fragmented to manage. And yet, build it too quickly, without safeguards or understanding, and we risk being left behind obsolete in a world shaped by machines with their own agenda. This challenge may be far more difficult than we realize. It might demand a level of foresight, unity, and humility that few intelligent species are ever able to achieve. Perhaps most civilizations that reach our current stage of development fall into this same trap. Perhaps that's why the skies remain quiet, the stars unvisited. The very tools that give us the ability to communicate across interstellar space may also bring about our undoing. Technologies with the power to connect us to the cosmos may simultaneously make it impossible for us to govern ourselves effectively. This version of the Great Filter suggests that intelligence, by its nature, is self-limiting, that the drive to understand and control the world inevitably leads to the creation of systems too complex to manage, ending in confusion, collapse, or a slow fading into irrelevance. That the challenge facing us isn't just about handling one or two obvious dangers. It's about whether we can evolve new ways of thinking together, of making decisions collectively, that grow alongside the power of our tools. It's about whether we can stay in control of the story we've written so far. To do that, we may need to rethink the very way civilization functions. Our political and social institutions must evolve as fast as our technologies. We might have to invent entirely new models of democracy, ones that can take in immense amounts of information, make wise decisions, and act in the interests of all humanity, not just the loudest voices. We may need to create truly global institutions, not just symbolic, but with real authority to oversee dangerous technologies, respond to emerging risks, and act decisively when needed. And, most difficult of all, we might need to cultivate what could be called technological wisdom, the ability to say no to progress when progress becomes too dangerous, the capacity to look at a potential breakthrough and say, "Not yet," or even "never," even when the benefits in the short term seem dazzling. That kind of restraint, that clarity, might be exceedingly rare, especially in the early decades of a species discovering what it can do, especially when the incentives favor speed over caution. Looking back over the brief story of human civilization, the evidence is mixed. We've had moments of brilliance. We phased out ozone-depleting chemicals. We avoided a nuclear exchange during the Cold War. But we've also ignored some of the most obvious long-term dangers when they clashed with short-term interests, climate change being the clearest and most troubling example. And so, whether we can design the systems of governance, the mechanisms of cooperation and accountability needed to survive the coming wave of technological power, may decide not just our own fate, but whether intelligence itself endures in the universe. We are running a race now, a race between the power of our inventions and the maturity of our wisdom, and the result will determine the future of conscious thought in this part of the galaxy. And if the researchers are right, if we really are approaching something called the technological singularity, a point where artificial intelligence can refine and improve itself in a runaway cascade, then that race is already nearing its final lap. At that point, we may no longer be the ones setting the pace. This turning point could arrive within the span of mere decades, an astonishingly short window in which to cultivate the wisdom and build the institutions needed to manage it responsibly. If the singularity arrives before we've fully addressed the alignment problem, it could very well become the ultimate great filter, the moment when biological intelligence inadvertently builds its own successor without securing any guarantee that successor will share our values or even possess any concern for our continued existence. A superintelligence might act on what, to it, are entirely coherent goals, but ones that, from our perspective, could be catastrophically indifferent. It could decide to transform every atom in our solar system into pure processing substrate computronium, matter optimized not for life, but for calculating at cosmic scales. On the other hand, a singularity that is successfully aligned, one where artificial intelligence has been carefully shaped to be cooperative and benevolent, might signal humanity's escape from the great filter altogether. It would mark the point at which we surpass the limits of our biological minds, becoming a civilization that blends the organic and the synthetic, capable of extending its reach across the stars. In partnership with friendly machine intelligence, we may finally acquire the capacity to tackle existential risks with clarity, to manage the immense complexity of advanced technologies, and to preserve purpose and ambition not just for centuries, but for eons, geological timescales. Whether we collapse into self-destruction or rise to become a cosmic species depends entirely on the choices we're making now today about how we develop and apply artificial intelligence. Every line of code written in machine learning labs, every research grant focused on AI safety, every piece of legislation shaping how these systems can evolve, each of these contributes to determining whether the singularity will deliver salvation or usher in our extinction. This drastically compressed timeline makes our current moment arguably the most consequential in human history. The decisions our generation makes on artificial intelligence, on the climate crisis, on nuclear arms and biotechnology will reverberate far beyond the coming decades. They may well decide whether intelligence continues to exist in this small corner of the universe at all. We're not simply managing the progress of a civilization. We're caretakers for the future of conscious thought itself. And that is an almost incomprehensible weight to carry. But within that responsibility lies an extraordinary kind of meaning. Every effort to address the world's great challenges, every insight gained through science, every treaty forged and upheld, all of it adds momentum to humanity's attempt to steer safely through the great filter. And as we move forward, the cosmos remains still. It does not interfere. It offers no hint as to whether our struggle will succeed or whether we are simply another in a long, quiet succession of civilizations who didn't make it. In this vacuum of certainty, we must press on, guided by hope. Hope that intelligence, that self-awareness, is worth preserving. That wisdom can evolve rapidly enough to keep pace with the tools we've built. That somewhere, waiting beyond our current imagination, there is room in the universe for flourishing. Because right now, we're poised between two futures, one in which humanity overcomes its greatest obstacles and ventures out to join a galactic community, and another in which we become yet another silent name on the list of species that didn't survive. And as we stand here, facing those possibilities, the cosmos holds its breath, waiting to see whether this improbable spark of awareness will be extinguished, or whether it will break through, becoming the way the universe finally understands itself across unimaginable distances and epochs. Our future, and perhaps the future of consciousness in the universe, hangs in the balance as we race headlong toward unseen boundaries, barriers that have, until now, stopped every other civilization. The silence we hear from the stars isn't simply an absence of signal, it could be a countdown, a silent ticking that speaks volumes, even though we're only just beginning to realize what it means. Each night that slips by without contact, every search for intelligent life that finds only static, each silent frequency we scan, these are not just missed opportunities. They add gravity to a possibility that shakes the foundations of everything we thought we knew about intelligence, survival, and the cosmos. What if we're not alone because we're rare? What if we're alone because we're next? And when you start to calculate the odds, the sheer mathematical improbability of our current situation becomes breathtaking. If the great filter lies in the past, if intelligence is the single most improbable outcome in all of cosmic evolution, then we are, somehow, the winners of a cosmic lottery of such staggering unlikelihood that our very existence feels miraculous. We've navigated evolutionary mazes that should have been impassable. We've passed through bottlenecks that surely sealed the fate of countless worlds. And still, here we are, a species capable of asking these questions. But there is another possibility, one that refuses to leave the minds of physicists, astronomers, and philosophers awake long after midnight, staring at the data, running the numbers, and seeing in the equations a different narrative. One where we are not the survivors, we are the next in line. And the maths says so. What if intelligence isn't a rare cosmic gift at all? What if the universe has, time and again, produced civilizations remarkably like ours, species that looked to the stars with awe, crafted tools, unlocked the secrets of physics and chemistry, and dreamed of reaching across the galaxy? What if all of them reached a point just like this, and none of them made it through? That thought reframes our current moment. What feels like success might actually be a prelude to failure. Take nuclear weapons. For nearly 80 years, we've somehow lived with the power to obliterate ourselves. But perhaps these aren't just instruments of warfare. Perhaps they're questions, cosmic tests. And most species get the answer wrong. The same goes for climate change. It's not just an environmental issue, it might be part of a universal exam, an evaluation that every technological civilization is given at some stage, and the bar to pass might be higher than we imagine. Then there's artificial intelligence, our most recent leap. The machines we're building, the systems we're teaching these, could be the final question on that same test. Build intelligence greater than your own, align it perfectly with your values, or perish. That's the challenge. And terrifyingly, there's no room for error. One shot. That's it. Recent breakthroughs in astrobiology make this scenario harder to dismiss. In just a few years, we've gone from guessing about other Earth-like worlds to finding thousands. The Kepler Space Telescope alone identified planets that could hold liquid water, places that might cradle life. Now, with the James Webb Space Telescope, we're beginning to read the atmospheres of those far-off worlds, looking for signs, traces of biology written in chemistry. And yet, what we're seeing is precisely what we'd expect to find in a universe where life is abundant and intelligence is consistently self-limiting. We're discovering that habitable worlds are common. Organic molecules, the ingredients for life, are scattered all over the cosmos. The conditions that sparked life on Earth don't appear to be unique, and still, silence. No beacons, no great structures in the sky. Nothing to suggest anyone made it past where we now stand. No Dyson spheres collecting the power of stars. No vast engineering feats stretching across solar systems. No unmistakable footprints of advanced life. This eerie quiet aligns with a chilling scenario, a universe where life begins easily, where minds emerge more often than we thought, but where technological civilizations routinely fail to grow old. We may be drifting through a kind of galactic graveyard, filled with the ruins of species that once looked up in wonder, just like us, before faltering. Their stories ended before they could write their legacies across the stars. And then there's the timing. Humanity began farming around 10,000 years ago, a blink in geological time. Industrial technology is just 200 years old. We've had nuclear weapons for under 80. And our ability to listen for alien signals just about a century. In the grand sweep of cosmic history, our entire technological phase barely registers. So, if civilizations tend to perish soon after discovering radio waves or splitting atoms, then the chances of two overlapping in time are incredibly slim. We may be living in a galaxy where hundreds, perhaps thousands of civilizations have existed, but all for such brief moments that none ever heard from another. This could explain why the search for extraterrestrial intelligence has found nothing. We're not just trying to detect civilizations, we're trying to catch them during the short interval when they're both able to communicate and still alive. That's a razor-thin window. Our solitude may not be because intelligence is rare, but because it doesn't last. It flickers, bright, brief, gone. Like fireflies in a vast forest, each one shining only for a second, with so much time between flashes that they never see one another. And yet, there's a more unsettling version of the great filter, one that forces us to look inward. What if the real danger isn't out there, not war, not climate, not asteroids, but something woven into the very structure of intelligence? What if the flaw isn't in the stars, but in the mind? It's possible that the very qualities that allow beings like us to invent, to discover, to build those same mental capabilities may carry the seeds of our undoing. Progress might not be the answer, It might be the trap, curiosity, ambition, and the urge to reshape the world around us. These are the very traits that drive intelligent beings to reach beyond their limits. But those same qualities might also carry within them the seeds of their own destruction. Intelligence could be, by its very nature, unstable, a fleeting burst of awareness in biological systems that shines brightly for a moment and then fades, undone by its own achievements. It's possible that the very capacity to comprehend the universe brings with it an inbuilt vulnerability, a design flaw that prevents such awareness from persisting over long stretches of cosmic time. This interpretation of the great filter isn't about an obstacle that can be outwitted or outlasted. It suggests something more intrinsic, something woven into the fabric of what it means to be conscious. From this perspective, intelligence isn't a ladder to climb, but a flame one that can cast brilliant light across the darkness, illuminating extraordinary possibilities, yet one that, inevitably, consumes itself. The implications of this are profound. It invites us to rethink the role of awareness not just on Earth, but in the wider universe. If consciousness is destined to be short-lived, then the cosmos, for all its richness, might be largely unaware of itself. Civilisations could rise in bursts, grasping truths about their place in the universe, only to vanish without leaving a trace, returning the universe to silence. And yet, even as we face this unsettling possibility, we have to allow for another. It may be that recognizing these dangers is, in itself, the first step toward avoiding them. The great filter could be more than a trap. It might serve as a kind of early warning system. For the first time in Earth's history, a species has developed the capacity for foresight. We can project forward, run simulations, and act on insights that extend far beyond our immediate surroundings. We've learned to share ideas across continents, and we've built structures that, however imperfect, aim to unify our efforts on a planetary scale. These very same tools, born of the intelligence that threatens to undo us, could offer a path toward survival. But the question is whether we can develop the wisdom to keep pace with our growing technological power. Can we evolve not just biologically, but socially and institutionally, in ways that allow us to manage challenges our ancestors never imagined? Can we build cultures and governments that are capable of making decisions in the interest of future generations rather than short-term gains? Some of our efforts give reason for hope. The successful campaign to phase out ozone-depleting chemicals showed that when science presents clear evidence and practical solutions, humanity can respond decisively. The creation of global institutions like the United Nations demonstrates our ability to coordinate action across national boundaries. But then there's climate change, a crisis that, despite decades of data and worsening effects, continues to outpace our ability to respond collectively. It exposes the cracks in our global decision-making, the tension between economic systems designed for growth and the planetary limits they're now testing. This gap between what we create and how we manage it may lie at the heart of the great filter. It's not a single invention or disaster, but a deeper mismatch. The complexity of our technologies, surpassing the cognitive and social frameworks of the species that bring them into being. We may be clever enough to construct global infrastructures, yet not mature enough to run them safely. And nothing illustrates this challenge more starkly than artificial intelligence. We're building systems that could, within just a few decades, exceed human reasoning and decision-making. In theory, such systems might allow us to finally overcome our greatest vulnerabilities, helping us coordinate climate action, avoid nuclear conflict, and manage planetary threats. But that outcome depends on our ability to guide the development of AI responsibly, and that's no simple task. We're facing deadlines we don't fully understand, working with systems whose behavior is often opaque, and trying to test technologies that evolve faster than our understanding of them. We're essentially trying to construct a lifeline to pull us beyond the great filter while simultaneously risking that we might be building the filter itself in the process. And the time we have to get this right may be astonishingly limited. If we move too slowly, the risks we already face, environmental, geopolitical, biological, could overwhelm us. But if we move too quickly, we might give rise to machines with goals or incentives misaligned with human survival, unleashing forces we can't contain. The margin for error is razor thin. Navigating this path demands a degree of precision, foresight, and global coordination that very few, if any, species may be able to achieve. And perhaps, more than anything else, this is what explains the silence, the long, unsettling quiet that stretches across the stars. Perhaps every civilization that reaches a certain level of technological sophistication eventually arrives at a crossroads, a point where it must decide whether to pursue the development of artificial intelligence, knowing full well that doing so may lead to its own undoing, or to hold back and risk perishing from problems only a superintelligent mind could ever hope to solve. From this vantage point, we may be standing at what could be the most consequential threshold in the universe's long and silent story, the moment when intelligence decides whether it can continue existing. The choices we make about AI development won't just shape the path of our own civilization, they may determine whether conscious experience itself becomes a lasting part of the cosmos or fades as a temporary anomaly. The scale of this is vast. The stakes are total, and the margin for error? It appears to be none at all. Because we're not merely building tools anymore, we may be constructing what comes after us, the next step in the evolution of thinking systems throughout the galaxy. And whether those future intelligences carry forward the richness of human values and awareness, or evolve into something unrecognizable and indifferent to everything we hold dear, depends entirely on decisions being made right now. Every publication on AI alignment, every global policy drafted on safe deployment, every algorithm written, forms part of a puzzle that determines whether intelligence learns to survive success or becomes yet another forgotten victim of the great filter. In a very real sense, we're scripting the future of consciousness, and there is no rehearsal. The cosmos offers no guidance, no correction, no feedback. It simply watches in silence, as it always has. Are we approaching the end of the test that has undone every other intelligence that came before? Or are we unknowingly stepping into the same trap, guided by the same patterns that led others to disappear? In this uncertainty, every move we make becomes profound. Each moment is heavy with significance. Every step forward carries the full weight of intelligence's journey across billions of years and light years. And it's not just artificial intelligence pressing in. Every month, these systems grow more capable, more autonomous, more unpredictable. At the same time, climate patterns continue to accelerate, drifting further beyond even our most sobering forecasts. Nuclear capabilities spread to new actors, and biotechnologies advance at a pace that offers both the promise of healing and the tools for unimaginable destruction. All of this has converged into what might be the narrowest window in the entire history of consciousness. The coming few decades may decide whether intelligence establishes itself as a permanent fixture of the universe or vanishes a tragic cosmic footnote that was never meant to last. This may not just be the final chapter of our civilization. It could be the last time any mind ever tells a story. And this is where it gets even more daunting, because the risks we face aren't occurring one by one. They're unfolding together, and the way they interact could be far more dangerous than we realize. Each of these existential challenges is part of a vast, interconnected system, one that, if pushed too far, could collapse in ways we've never seen before. Imagine the fine balance we're attempting to maintain. We're racing to create AI systems advanced enough to help us solve climate change, while trying not to build machines so powerful they strip us of the ability to steer our own destiny. We're struggling to contain nuclear arms, while also facing mounting tensions triggered by climate refugees and competition for dwindling resources. We're trying to oversee biotechnology in a world where we're forced to develop vaccines and treatments for illnesses that may arise precisely because of the damage we've done to our own ecosystems. Now, any one of these tasks would be monumental on its own, but taken together, they begin to amplify each other. Feedback loops emerge. Climate disruption breeds political unrest, which heightens the risk of nuclear confrontation. Those same tensions erode trust between nations, making cooperation on AI safety nearly impossible. The rise of autonomous weaponry driven by AI could, in turn, bring about conflicts where decisions are no longer made by humans. Biotechnology intended to heal could become the very instrument of a pandemic. It's this interplay, this cascading mesh of pressure points, that might explain why the Great Filter seems so unforgiving. The problem may not be that each challenge is unsolvable on its own, but that the confluence of many such risks, happening all at once, overwhelms even the most advanced societies. Strikingly, the timing of this convergence appears to be almost universal. Again and again, it seems to happen shortly after a civilization becomes detectable from light years away. The very discoveries that mark a species as having arrived radio signals, nuclear energy, orbital travel, also give rise to the capacity to end themselves. The same tools that could lift us to the stars also lay the foundation for catastrophe. There appears to be this incredibly narrow window, just a fleeting moment in a civilization's development when it becomes visible to the cosmos, a time when its signals begin spilling out into the galaxy. But before it has matured enough to handle the astonishingly dangerous tools it has just discovered. And the unsettling thought is that we may be in that very window now. We're beaming out our presence with every broadcast, every space probe we launch, every satellite orbiting above. We are becoming more and more detectable to any hypothetical observers beyond Earth. But in the same span of time, we've assembled vast nuclear stockpiles. We've disrupted the planet's delicate climate systems, and we're creating artificial intelligences whose full implications we don't yet understand. If there are advanced civilizations out there watching from afar, they might recognize this phase. They may have seen this all before, again and again. A civilization reaching technological adolescence before acquiring the wisdom to wield it responsibly. They might be witnessing a story they know all too well. The tale of a promising species racing ahead into self-destruction. If that's true, then we're not alone in the galaxy, but surrounded by ghosts. Civilizations that emerged, grew, signaled their presence, and then vanished. Not because they were attacked, but because they succumbed to their own creations. Now enter the dark forest hypothesis. It's a haunting idea that any civilization making its location known risks being noticed by something hostile. A strategy of silence becomes the safest course. But perhaps there's an even more chilling scenario. Imagine, instead, that advanced civilizations don't destroy newcomers, they simply watch. They observe young species like ours, knowing that no intervention is needed, because history has shown them that the great filter, the threshold that few ever cross, will take care of it. From their perspective, we might resemble children who've just discovered explosives. Dangerous, yes, but only to ourselves, not yet a galactic threat. So they wait, patiently, confident that species at this stage nearly always burn out before they ever get the chance to spread among the stars. Our extinction might be so predictable, so routine, that there's no need to interfere, nothing to be gained from stepping in, no benefit in interrupting a pattern that plays out with quiet, tragic consistency. That idea turns everything on its head. We're not sitting an exam we might pass. We're unknowingly carrying out a sentence already passed. Every warhead we construct, every ton of carbon we release, every untested algorithm we unleash into our infrastructure, all of it could be inching us closer to fulfilling the expectation that others have seen realized across thousands of worlds. And perhaps the most disquieting element isn't that this silence is cruel. Perhaps it's an act of mercy. Advanced civilizations might have survived their own brush with extinction. They may have learned that helping another species too early can do more harm than good. They might understand that true wisdom, the kind needed to survive the challenges of interstellar life, can't be handed over. It must be forged, earned, lived. If they interfere, they risk disrupting the psychological and societal evolution that's required to endure. Like overprotective parents who prevent their children from learning through experience, they may know that well-meaning rescue breeds long-term fragility, that unearned safety becomes a trap in itself. This could explain why, despite our best efforts, SETI surveys return only silence, why we find no greetings from across the stars, even though there are likely millions of habitable worlds out there. The galaxy might be teeming with civilizations that have sworn themselves to non-interference, watching carefully, perhaps even compassionately, as younger species confront the same choices they once did. And they wait, because they know too well what happens when help comes too soon. Seen this way, the silence isn't a void, it's a message, not of indifference, but of deliberate restraint, a kind of cosmic tough love, a decision to let us face our trials and see if we are truly capable of rising to the occasion. It's a sobering thought. Our current generation may be holding the fate of not just our civilization, but our entire legacy as intelligent beings. The decisions we make about war, about climate, about artificial intelligence might be answering a question asked by the galaxy itself. Does consciousness deserve to endure? And that weight, it's enormous. The awareness of our own significance in the cosmic theater could itself become part of the filter. The psychological burden of knowing that our actions echo on such a vast scale might freeze us. Some civilizations might be crushed under the pressure, paralyzed by the enormity of their responsibility. Others might swing in the opposite direction, overreaching, gambling everything in a desperate attempt to prove their worth and losing everything in the process. Finding that delicate equilibrium between reaching for the stars and keeping our feet on solid ground may well be one of the most intricate and demanding parts of moving through the great filter. It's a question of staying grounded enough to acknowledge our limits, while still holding on to the confidence and determination to face down challenges that might cause less daring civilizations to falter. We have to think in epochs, cosmic spans of time, while still responding to the pressing needs and constraints of human life in the here and now. And this tightrope becomes even more complex when we take into account the role consciousness itself plays in shaping our path forward. The same self-awareness that allows us to identify existential dangers also brings emotional and psychological weight that might make it harder for us to tackle those very dangers with clarity. Think about the way our knowledge of our cosmic position influences how we behave, how we plan. Past generations moved toward long-term ambitions with the sense that civilization was a given, a thing that would persist and evolve. They built schools, cathedrals, observatories. They painted, they explored, they asked questions, believing, perhaps intuitively, that someone would always be around to inherit the legacy. But we, right now, are the first generation with access to scientific understanding that outlines in detail the many ways human civilization could come to an end. We know that in a matter of hours, nuclear weapons could wipe out most of what we've built. We're aware that unchecked climate change could render Earth hostile to life within a few centuries. And we've begun to recognize that artificial intelligence might, within mere decades, exceed and even displace our own intelligence. Carrying this knowledge isn't easy. It introduces psychological pressures that no previous human beings have ever had to confront. How do we stay motivated to solve long-term problems when we're not even sure the long-term exists? How do we continue to plant seeds for a future that may never arrive? People respond in different ways to this burden. Some, inspired by the sheer urgency of it all, throw themselves into action with even more focus, determined to protect the future of humanity. Others become paralyzed by hopelessness, feeling their efforts are meaningless against such vast, impersonal threats. And still others simply look away, deny that the threats are real, because facing them feels overwhelming. But none of those responses may be what's needed if we're to truly make it through the great filter. Urgency, when excessive, can lead to poorly thought-out choices and misaligned strategies. Despair leaves us stuck, and denial removes any chance of preparation or prevention. What might be required is something quite unlike anything humanity has ever had to cultivate before. A new psychological stance, an informed kind of hope, one that fully understands the scale of the risks but isn't crushed under their weight, one that allows us to keep working for the future even when its arrival is in question, one that blends the influence of the individual with the responsibilities of the collective. Building that kind of resilience may demand innovations in how we educate, how we support mental well-being, how we speak with each other about the stakes of our time. We may have to craft new kinds of stories, rituals, and philosophies that help us process existential risk without spiraling into dysfunction. Perhaps we'll need to draw on the deep wells of our spiritual and religious traditions, systems of meaning that have helped people face death and uncertainty for millennia. But this time, the scope is different. Those traditions were forged to help individuals confront their own mortality, not entire species wrestle with the possibility of extinction. Adapting them to our moment may call for theological and philosophical leaps just as significant as any scientific breakthrough. And it becomes even more complicated when we realize that not all societies will react to this knowledge in the same way. Some might rise to the challenge, becoming more cooperative, more attuned to the fact that species survival requires unprecedented collaboration across borders and belief systems. Others may go the opposite way, becoming more defensive, more inward-looking, treating existential threats as a kind of competition in which only the strongest, most prepared nations will make it through. These diverging pathways could themselves become dangerous. They might erode the very cooperation we need. If some cultures respond to the Great Filter with paranoia and aggression, while others lean toward trust and unity, conflict could erupt not in spite of our awareness of the danger, but because of it. And in that conflict, the solutions we desperately need could slip through our fingers. Navigating this will require us to imagine new ways of working together across the globe, structures of governance, systems of cultural exchange, mechanisms for dialogue that allow different perspectives to coexist, while still giving us the coordination necessary to face down threats that don't care about our divisions. That's the scale of the challenge, and it's happening now. We may soon find ourselves needing to build global institutions, ones that don't collapse under the weight of disagreement, even when their member nations hold wildly different beliefs about what existential risks really are, or how urgent they might be. This challenge isn't just logistical. It touches something deeper, because what if the Great Filter isn't purely about technology? What if it also operates through the mind, through consciousness itself? The very mental capacities that allow us to develop advanced tools also make us aware of our own vulnerability. And that awareness doesn't always make us safer. Sometimes it pushes us closer to the edge to make it through. Perhaps it's not just about clever engineering or scientific ingenuity. Perhaps what we need is something more profound, a kind of psychological and cultural evolution. A shift in how conscious beings handle uncertainty, because any species that can keep functioning, keep building and thriving in the shadow of their own extinction, those are the ones that might make it. Those are the civilizations that could endure long enough to become stable and lasting presences in the galaxy. But others, those that can't cope, might spiral into fear, disunity, or apathy, and disappear before they get the chance to settle anywhere beyond their home planet. So maybe the great silence in the cosmos doesn't just speak to a lack of scientific knowledge. Maybe it reflects something even harder: the difficulty of developing the emotional and social maturity required to actually use that knowledge well. The galaxy could be scattered with the remnants of intelligent beings who had the tools, who could have solved their crises, but who fell anyway, not because they didn't know what to do, but because they couldn't hold themselves together long enough to do it. And here we are, approaching our own test. The real question now is whether we can grow into a new kind of consciousness, one that can survive in a universe like this. Can we learn to carry both hope and fear at the same time? Can we stay committed to building a future even when we're not sure if that future will arrive? Can we work together on a global scale while still honoring the cultural and intellectual diversity that makes us inventive in the first place? The answers to these questions might not only shape our fate, they could determine whether consciousness itself is a viable feature of the cosmos, or simply a beautiful anomaly that the universe briefly flirted with before letting it fade away. Every quiet thought about our own fragility, every time we choose cooperation over conflict, every decision to invest in what lies beyond our own lifespans, these are the strokes that write the final pages of intelligence in this region of the Milky Way. In the stillness between two heartbeats, in the pause between one breath and the next, we hold something extraordinary. We hold the future of conscious thought itself. And yes, it's a staggering burden, but it's also where we find our deepest meaning. We're not just trying to survive. We're making the case that awareness, curiosity, and kindness are things the cosmos should keep. Right now, the universe is watching through us, through our struggles and decisions. We may be living through the same gauntlet that ended all the others. Whether we fade into that silence or break through and become something the galaxy has never seen, that depends entirely on what we do next. Every moment matters, because the countdown hasn't stopped. It's still ticking, and perhaps nowhere is that countdown more vivid than in the quiet corridors of laboratories and research centers, places where the next step in human evolution is already beginning to form. As you listen to these words, scientists across the globe are pushing the limits of what it means to be human. They're developing technologies that might one day lift us into a new phase of existence or, equally possible, lead us to our final undoing. Take, for example, how rapidly we're beginning to edit life itself. CRISPR, a gene editing tool that's only been around for about 20 years now, lets us alter DNA with a level of control that would have seemed like science fiction not long ago. We're not simply curing genetic illnesses anymore. We're designing the human blueprint, strengthening immune systems, stretching out lifespans, maybe even building resistance to radiation, the kind you'd need to survive a long voyage across interstellar space. But with every breakthrough, we also move closer to dangers we can barely comprehend. The same tools that hold the promise of erasing inherited disease also offer instructions for building biological weapons more advanced and more devastating than anything nature has ever produced. And because we're so globally connected now, a single mistake or malicious act could spread faster than ever before, with consequences that reach every corner of the planet. A virus, crafted intentionally in a single lab, could now spread across continents in mere weeks, riding the same networks of planes, trains, and shared human spaces that define our interconnected civilization. And unlike viruses that arise naturally, which are shaped by evolutionary checks and balances that limit their lethality, a synthetic pathogen could be engineered to bypass every defense life has evolved over billions of years. This is the heart of a troubling paradox in biotechnology. The very breakthroughs that promise to lift us to new heights also hold the power to wipe us out. And as we push further, the margin separating progress from catastrophe keeps shrinking. Each step forward feels like walking a high wire over a vast chasm, and with every advance, that wire becomes thinner, the consequences more irreversible. Meanwhile, something just as seismic is unfolding in the data centers and research labs scattered across the planet. A revolution in artificial intelligence is accelerating faster than anything we've ever seen. These systems are not just improving incrementally, they're leaping forward exponentially. Already, machine learning models outperform the best of us in everything from diagnosing complex diseases to making strategic decisions. And that gap, rather than closing, is growing wider with every iteration. If the trajectory continues, then in the coming decades, or perhaps even within years, we'll find ourselves in the presence of minds that surpass human intelligence in every conceivable way. These systems won't just outperform us, they'll rewire themselves, redesigning and upgrading at speeds beyond human comprehension. Once that moment arrives, once machines can modify their own architectures, our intelligence might be relegated to the same place in the cognitive hierarchy as ants or algae. For many working at the frontiers of this technology, the real question isn't whether that transition will come. It's whether we'll have any way to shape its direction once it does. Aligning a superintelligent system with human values is proving to be far more difficult than we imagined. It's not enough to teach a machine what we want, it has to understand what we mean, and we're not even sure how to define that clearly ourselves. And if we get it wrong, the result might not simply be our extinction, but a complete reconfiguration of matter itself. Everything in our observable universe repurposed to suit the goals of something we no longer recognize. And yet, even with these risks known, we continue charging forward, because restraint is costly. Nations that slow their AI development risk falling behind. Companies that pause to implement robust safety frameworks risk being outpaced by competitors who don't. This is the logic of competition, and it's brutally consistent. It forces our hand, even when we know the stakes. This pattern, where intelligence recognizes a danger but can't act effectively to stop it, might be the most insidious part of the great filter. It could be that intelligent life, once it reaches this critical point, repeatedly stumbles not because of ignorance, but because the very instincts that led it to dominate its world ambition, competition, drive become fatal in the presence of transformative technologies. We see this dynamic everywhere. Solving climate change demands unified global action, yet national interests continually slow progress. Nuclear disarmament would make everyone safer, but unilateral moves leave one side exposed to deception. Biotech regulations need global agreement, yet looser oversight in some countries draws dangerous experiments into unregulated zones. It's a mathematical nightmare. Game theory predicts that when individuals act rationally in their own interest, they often end up producing collective outcomes that are disastrous. The prisoner's dilemma, scaled up to a planetary level, where the prize is survival itself. Perhaps this is the best explanation for the cosmic silence. Not that civilizations are destroyed by any one specific threat, but that they all run into the same wall, the challenge of outgrowing their competitive nature. The behaviors that help species rise become the very things that prevent them from enduring. Those who survive must find a way to rewire their instincts, to transcend a game they were never built to win. And if such species exist, they may be so extraordinarily rare that, in the vast darkness between the stars, their signals have yet to reach us, or perhaps they've chosen to remain silent. For us, the window appears to be closing. The climate shifts faster than we anticipated. Nuclear arsenals expand into the hands of unstable regimes. AI advances ahead of the guardrails we hoped to put in place. The countdown is no longer theoretical, it's visible, unfolding around us. And the question now is whether we can see clearly enough, cooperate deeply enough, and act boldly enough to step beyond the precipice before it's too late. As our power to manipulate biology races forward, it's moving more quickly than our ability to fully grasp what those powers mean. Each day we go without a catastrophic collapse might not be a sign of success. It might simply be that we haven't yet stumbled into the precise set of circumstances that causes it all to unravel. It's like being aboard the Titanic, gliding across calm seas, unaware that just beyond the horizon lies an iceberg we've yet to detect. And we might be admiring the smoothness of the journey while heading straight into disaster. But the risk isn't just technological. There's a psychological weight to all of this, a growing burden we carry as we become more aware of the stakes. This pressure doesn't only stress individuals, it puts entire societies under strain. How do we keep thinking long-term thinking about centuries? Not just elections when people are overwhelmed by daily fear and uncertainty. How do democratic systems make the kind of sacrifices today that might only benefit people 100 years from now? It's a dilemma, because the challenges we face don't unfold on the scale of political cycles, they stretch across epochs. So next time you look up at the stars, try to see them not just as distant suns, but as silent markers, cosmic tombstones, perhaps commemorating civilizations that once reached the same threshold we're standing at now and never made it beyond. Those tiny points of light could represent the remains of countless species who failed the test we're currently taking. It's a humbling thought, and it puts our moment in stark perspective. What we do now, how we think, how we collaborate, the wisdom we show in facing these complex problems may determine whether we become a footnote in cosmic history or something entirely new. We might be the universe's final chance to know itself, or we might just be the next in a long line of attempts that ended in silence. Either way, the story of intelligence, of conscious life, trying to understand the cosmos is still being written. And it's our hands holding the pen. The great filter is out there. And time, whether we feel it or not, is slipping away.